Well, we are wrapping up today the series on habits, and Pastor Dave has been doing an amazing job with this series. And next week, he kicks off a brand new series that we're going to be hanging out and kind of visiting all through the month of December. So we just want to encourage you to keep up with that. So today we're going to be wrapping it up, and I want to open up by asking you to see if anyone has ever seen, back in the 80s, if you're as old as me or older, maybe you saw a movie called City Slickers. All right, great movie, super funny, one of my favorite movies. It's got Billy Crystal in it, who's just a hilarious guy. And so in this one scene of City Slickers, he and Jack Palance, which is called Curly, they're riding on these horses together, and Jack Palance's character Curly begins to tell Mitch this great big life lesson. Okay, he's about to give him this great thing that he can take with him. And he says, Curly says to Mitch, "Do you know what the secret of life is?" And so Mitch says, "No, what?" And he holds up his finger. He says, "This." And Mitch says, "What, your finger? Your finger's the secret of life?" And Curly says, "No, one thing. Just one thing. You stick to that and nothing else matters." And Mitch said, "But what is that one thing?" And Curly says, "That's what you have to figure out. You have to figure out what that one thing is." So if you and I played that same scenario over in our lives and ask ourselves the same question, what would be the most important thing that you would say is in your life? That one thing. What would you say it is? Now, reflect on that just for a few seconds, and then ask yourself, what am I doing to complement this one thing? What am I doing to push forward this one thing that I have articulated to myself, this is the most important thing in my life? What are you doing to accomplish it or make it better? Are you doing anything to actually make this one thing a reality in your life? Or are you just hoping that it just magically or organically happens on its own without any effort of your own? Because here's a fact. Our lives are way too valuable to waste on meaningless things. Way too valuable. So while we have the opportunity, we should be focusing on the things in our life that really matter. Because here's the deal. If you think about it, God has given us just one life on this earth. That's it. One life. Once it's over, it is over. It's done. You can't come back reincarnated and do it over and try to do it again. That's it. You get one chance, one opportunity to make the best of this one life that God has given us. And I truly believe that God's heart, his desire, is for us to always be making changes as we progress in this journey that he's given us, to always be trying to be better and try to get better. Spiritual changes, relational changes, and even changes in the way that we view generosity. Now, I know in churches and faith communities all over the country that as soon as people hear the word giving or generosity, our minds immediately go towards money. But can I tell you that that's just a very small part of what Jesus was referring to when he was talking about giving. To Jesus, the word generosity meant something much, much more. Now, to set it up just a little bit, maybe if you were like me, you grew up and you were taught to believe that more is better. The more that you have, the better off that you'll be, okay? If I have more plaques, if I have more trophies, if I have more accolades, I'll feel better about myself. If I have more power, I'll have more respect. If I have more education, I'll have more promotions and opportunities. If I have more money, I'll have more security. If I have more friends, I'll feel more popular. My relationships will be stronger. My spouse and my kids will respect me more. And we have lots of examples of people who actually have this same mentality of more is better. But then they end up finding out that more is not always better. ESPN did a 30 for 30 documentary. If you've ever watched some of the 30 for 30s that ESPN puts out, they did one titled Broke. And in this documentary, it highlights athletes who are at the top of their game, making millions of dollars, and now are broke, and some even homeless. It goes on to say that by the time NFL players have been retired for just 2 years, 78% of them have become bankrupt or are under some sort of financial stress. And within 5 years of retirement, an estimated 60% of former NBA players are completely broke. Growing up, one of my responsibilities was cutting the grass. I would cut the grass, and then my parents would give me a $5 bill. Then I would immediately jump on my bike, run down to the store, and spend all 5 of it. Candy, soda, firecrackers, whatever. It was gone. Every week I would do this. But if I realized that if I cut my neighbor's grass as well, she would give me $5 too. $5 was great, but $10 was better. Because then I would spend all 10 of that dollars on the same thing. Just go down to the store and just blow it. Growing up, we had 1 car, and then one day we got 2 cars. 1 car was good, but 2 cars were better. We had 1 TV in our house, in the living room, but as my brothers and I got older, my parents decided this is not great, this is not healthy, so we got our own 13-inch black and white TV. Woo! It was awesome, and it was in my room. 1 TV was good, but 2 TVs were better. When I turned 18, I was a lifeguard, making my own money. Believe it or not, at one time, this was the physique of a lifeguard. Not anymore. But I had 1 job, but I wanted more money, so I went and got another job delivering pizzas at night. I made a lot of money in tips. 1 job was good, but 2 jobs were better. Fast forward, I met Janet, I got married. Now I had 1 wife. And I realized really quickly that I don't need 2 wives. 1 wife is plenty. More wives are dangerous. So 1 wife was great. And then we decided for some reason after we had a baby that more is better. So we made 3 more. Why, I don't know. But now we have 4 kids, and I love all 4 of them, of course. But as Americans, guys, let's face it, compared to the rest of the world, we've basically lost all sense of rationale in regards to acquiring stuff. Even though we live in America, one of the most wealthy and influential countries in the entire world, it's easy to fall into this poverty mentality. And like Pastor Dave talked about last week, this comparison trap. And then we sit around and we complain about the things that we don't have because we never have enough. So I started asking myself this question: when is it enough? Or what is enough? What does enough look like? And I wonder if I created a sort of self-inventory of what enough really looks like, and what are the things that really matter to me? What would that list look like? So then I began to kind of define what matters to me. And here are my top 3 things that matter the most to me, okay? Number 1 is my relationships and my friendships. My relationship with God. My relationship with my spouse and my children. My relationship and my friendships with you, my faith community. The second thing that's the second most important thing to me is my family. Inside of number 1. Being my family's provider, being their protector, leaving a legacy, how they view me as husband and father are extremely important to me. And the third thing is my influence. I want to truly make a difference with the abilities and the gifts and the talents and the skills that God has given me. I truly want to make a difference with those things and leverage the influence that God has given me. Those are my top 3 most important things to me. So anytime this morning, you can do this while we're doing the message, or maybe you can take this home and kind of process through this by yourself or maybe with your spouse. But I want you to do the same thing. I want you to process through the 3 most important things in your life in no certain order. Now, here's what I noticed when I was kind of coming up with this inventory about the things that I wrote down. Here's what I noticed about all 3 of these things. None of them require stuff for them to matter to me. Nothing tangible related to stuff is going to better my relationship with God or make me love God more. More is not better because he still matters to me and he's super important to me. If I fill up every room in my house with the finest furnishings and big screen TVs, it's not going to affect the way that I love my wife and my 4 children. They still matter to me no matter what I do or don't have. My relationship with you, my faith family, is not contingent or impacted or built on a foundation of things, because you still matter to me. More isn't better. So if we're to achieve the things that really matter to us, the things that make our list, our faith, our friendships, our family, whatever those things are, we actually have to tame our appetites for stuff and begin to shift our lifestyle and our mentality and really begin believing that less is more. That less is more. You think less is more. What do you mean by less is more? Think about this. If we eliminate the things in our lives that don't matter, it'll create room for the things that do matter. Less of this, whatever this is, equals more of that, whatever that is. More is not better, less is more. We read a verse in the book of Ecclesiastes, which is in the Old Testament, written by King Solomon, who is King David's son, and he says this: better to have 1 handful with quietness than 2 handfuls with hard work and chasing the wind. Translation: don't get so in over your head that it takes both hands working as hard as they can to make your life run or to keep up. When we're not trying to keep up with our neighbors and we learn to be content with what we have peace in our souls, and we can work with 1 hand with quietness. It's better than 2 handfuls and just chasing the wind. When we have 1 hand full and 1 hand empty, it creates a lot of margin for us to be able to do things and to help people. So why is 1 hand full better? Why should we always keep this margin in our lives to create this space? Well, if we have 1 hand full and 1 hand empty, and someone needs a hand up because they're down, we've got margin in our lives to do that. If we have 1 hand full and 1 hand empty, we have margin in our lives to give someone a ride when they need a ride. If we have 1 hand full and 1 hand empty and someone just loses a loved one and they need comfort and support and hope, we've got margin to be able to do that. And if I have 1 hand full and 1 hand empty and someone needs me to share my faith and they ask me about my relationship with God, I have margin in my life to where I can do that and share the story about my relationship with me and my Creator. And we will never arrive at this stage if we have both hands full, working hard, chasing the wind, because we have a more is better mentality instead of a less is more mentality. Now, just in case you're kind of having difficulty thinking, what's my top 3? What are the 3 most important things to me? Let me put a little filter on it, okay? Suppose I come up to you and say, hey, you have 3 months to live. I think that would change our top 3 list. If I told you in 3 months you're going to be leaving this one life that God has given you and drifting off into the next, what would that list look like then? Because I can almost guarantee you that almost everyone's list in here would look identical or nearly identical. My relationship with God, relationship with my family, my friends, my health, my friends' health, my family's health. Those are the things that would be on our top 3 list. Because let me tell you what I believe no one would write down. I don't believe that there would be things like how much money I have on my bank account. I don't think the size of your home would be on there. I don't think the position of your job would be on there. I don't think that new leather sofa or those new granite countertops that you've been saving up for so long, the number of Instagram followers you have. I don't believe any of those things would be on your list. And when we really define what matters to us, we often recognize that so much of our lives are spent pursuing the things that don't even make our list. We tend to think that whatever I don't have is what I need because we think that more is better, but more is not better. Less is more. Better to have 1 handful with quietness than 2 handfuls working hard and chasing the wind. When most of us look at our lives, let's face it, we're completely overwhelmed with what we have to process through on a weekly basis. our schedules, our workload, our possessions. So because I know that I can resonate with this feeling as well of being completely overwhelmed, here are 2 habits that I believe will help us all. I believe that these are the 2 habits that we should all incorporate in our lives if we really want to adopt this attitude of less is more. If we really want to make a difference, if we really want to make an impact on those around us, the first habit we need to create is we need to cut back. We need to cut back. I'm pretty confident that I could assume that most of us in here could cut back on things that we really don't need, things we could live without. And if you can't think of anything, imagine going to work tomorrow morning and find out you're being let go. Then you could come up with some things real quickly about what you don't need, right? The very first home that Janet and I purchased, little tiny house of 1,000 square feet. It was 3 bedroom, 1 bath. It was small, but guess what? It was ours. I was 22, Janet was 19. Our closets were so tiny, even if we wanted to be hoarders, we couldn't. All right, we didn't have the space, nor did we have the money to fill our house up with a bunch of stuff. So we lived in that house for 5 years, and then we sold it, and we got a bigger house. And this one had a walk-in closet. Oh, our first ever walk-in closet. We were so excited. So instead of doing the opposite of cutting back, we filled it up. We thought, well, we got a bigger closet, so now we got to fill it up. Because we have this mentality of, well, we have this bigger walk-in closet and more is better. Last Christmas, we were putting up our tree and my boys were helping me. And so Caleb, my family knows that I'm a huge classic Christmas music guy. I don't like all the new stuff, all right? You guys can have all the new stuff. I like the old stuff, the 40s and the 50s, all right? And so we're putting up the tree, and so Caleb starts playing some old classic Christmas songs through YouTube, through the Apple TV, and while the music is going, they're flashing scenes of Christmases from back in the 40s and the 50s. Just really kind of cool. And both of my boys almost simultaneously said, man, we would love to have lived back then. And I thought, no, you wouldn't. Let's face the fact, if I could put them in a time machine and send them back to the 50s, that'd last about 2 minutes because they'd be reaching down for their phones, they're all their little electronics things, they'd be begging to come back. But why is that? When we see images like that, and it kind of takes us to a different place mentally, why is that? What is it in us that craves a simpler lifestyle? To slow, the need to slow our pace down, to take our foot off the gas pedal of life and get back to simplicity. We need to learn to cut back because more is not better. Less is more. The second habit we need to create, if we really want to make an impact and a difference with this life that God's given us, is we have to clear out. We have to clear out. We have to cut back and then we have to clear out. Now, this goes back to having way too much stuff in our lives. Now, about once a year or once every other year, Janet and I, we do a purge, all right? And we have this rule of thumb. We've been married 24 years. We have this rule of thumb. If we haven't seen it or used it in 2 years, or if we don't see another future use for something, it's gone. We either dump it, scrap it, sell it, or wrap it, but it is leaving our house. Some of you may be getting some of those things. Merry Christmas. I'm done with this. What were garages created for? A vehicle, right? You know where I'm going with this. Some of us have garages that we can't even pull our vehicle into because we have so much stuff. Our houses are full, our attics are full, our garages are full. And then we rent a storage facility and put more of our stuff and pay somebody else to watch stuff that we don't even know what's in there. But we do that. As Americans, we do that. It's crazy when you say it out loud. But what I want in my life, honestly, is just deeper relational time. I want less stuff and more time with my family. I want less stuff and more experiences. This is one thing I love about the millennial generation, that 18 to 35-year-old. One thing I love about millennials is how they're getting back to practicality and simplicity and tradition, living debt-free, spending lots of time and energy on experiences instead of just acquiring a bunch of stuff. I love that. But what about us spiritually? Some of us need to do a clearing out in our spiritual lives. So what do you need? What do you need to clear out? Is there some unforgiveness, some bitterness, some jealousy, anger? Do you need to purge some addictions? Lack of trust, a complacency in your relationship with God? A couple of years ago, I listened to this phenomenal book. I do all my books on Audible because my ADD, I can't sit down and read a book. So I listened to this book called Simplify. It was so good, I listened to it twice, just back to back. When I got to the end, I started listening to it again. And in this book, the author, Bill Hybels, who's one of the most influential church leaders in the United States, he challenges readers to simplify their lives based on him waiting nearly too late to simplify his. In this book, Bill tells a story about being so overwhelmed and so consumed and taking on so much in his life that it literally was driving him clinically insane. And so much that he found himself getting angry one day as he was walking into his office there at Willow Creek. One of the custodians was cleaning the windows and he was whistling a praise and worship song. And Bill found himself angry because he had time to whistle. And he was wanting to go up to the person and say, hey, if you have time to whistle, you've got time to work harder. But he didn't say it, he restrained himself. So one day he goes home, he walks in and he sees a packed suitcase sitting in his foyer. It was for him. And his wife and his daughter, they packed this suitcase and they owned a home up in northern Michigan. And they said, we've already opened the cabin. We've already made all the arrangements. There's your clothes. Get out of here. You need to get away for a few days. So he goes up to northern Michigan and he takes care of himself and just really begins to pray and to heal. And then he wrote this book while he was up there. And it challenged me to think of how I can make changes to simplify my life, so that I can be the husband that Janet really deserves, so that I can be the father that my 4 kids deserve, so that I can be the pastor for my church community, my faith family, but also so I can be me who God's created me to be for me. We need to clear out our lives as if our life depends on it, because it declutters our hearts, it declutters our minds, and it frees us to be someone who really can make a difference. I know you've heard the old saying that you've never seen a U-Haul behind a hearse, and it's true. In the book of 1 Timothy, we read, true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. And Jesus himself said, life is not measured by how much you own. Your life does not consist of an abundance of stuff. The most meaningful things at the end of your life will never be stuff. It's time to cut back. It's time to clear out. More is not better. Less is more. So these are actually preparation habits, okay? That's setting us up mentally and emotionally and spiritually for what we're about to go into. If we really want to make a shift in our mentality about what that looks like, we need to make sure that we cut back and clear out. So you may be asking, well, how do I make this change? How do I make this emotional and spiritual shift of believing that less is more? How do I create these habits of cutting back and clearing out? Well, I believe that actually starts with this one thing, this one life that God has given us. When we start to believe the fact that less is more, and then we say, I choose to be a giver. I choose to be a giver. We've wrestled through these preparation habits of cutting back and clearing out, and then we're making the decision that I choose to be a giver. Remember, we have one chance to get this right. That's it, one chance. One chance to make an impact, one chance to really make a difference. We blink once and our kids are grown. We blink twice and it's 20 years later and we're still wrestling with the same stress that we never dealt with 20 years ago because we never changed. We blink the third time and we're 40 years older and now we're looking back saying, did my life really matter? Did I really make an impact? Did I really make a difference and be who God created me to be? Because I believe that Jesus wants us to live our lives like he lived, which is with a heart of generosity. Jesus walked the earth with his hands held up and open, selfless, willing, with humility and grace and love and mercy. And when he died the same way, with his hands held up and open, willing, full of mercy and grace and love. And in order for us to be like Christ, we need to live open-handed and open-hearted. Open-handed and open-hearted. As followers of Jesus, we should actually hold our blessings with an open hand and an open heart. And I'm not talking about just stuff. I know our minds, like we said earlier, automatically go there. But the blessings that I have from God go way beyond stuff. And I have to wrestle with the question, how open-handed and how open-hearted have I been with what God has trusted me? Because God is way more interested in our character than he is our comfort. So what are you doing with what God has blessed you? Are you being open-handed and open-hearted with how you treat others when we disagree with each other on parenting, relationships, politically, ethically, morally? Am I still kind to that person? Am I still open-handed and open-hearted with my kindness in showing Christ-like love? The scriptures refers to this with a word called stewardship. Being open-handed and open-hearted is like God asking the question, how are you being a good steward with what I have given you? How are you being a good steward and open-handed with your time? How are you being a good steward and open-hearted with your talents? How are you being a good steward and open-handed and open-hearted with your treasure? The second thing we need to remind ourselves, almost daily, is to say no to self. We have to constantly say no to self. We were not put here on this earth to accumulate stuff for ourselves. We were put here to make a difference. We were put here to make an impact. How? By learning to give and to be givers. We'll learn also that our generosity not only changes our lives, but also makes an impact through our giving back, giving of our time, giving of our energy, giving of our resources, everything that God has given us. How do we surrender that back and help others? Remember, better is one handful and an intimate relationship with my children than two handfuls and they grow up and I don't even know them. Better is one handful and some really great friendships than two handfuls and never having time for real spiritual community with my faith family. Better is one handful and some really cool experiences and memories than two handfuls and no time with my spouse. Better is one handful and watching God do amazing things through my generosity than two handfuls being closed-fisted with my blessings until I come to the end of my life with feelings of disappointment and regret. Some of the richest people in the world are not those who have the most, but those who need the least. Some of the most generous people I know are people that you would never expect. Years ago, my oldest daughter, Taylor, who sings on the worship team here, she would come home from elementary school every day just acting like she's starving to death, just so hungry, raiding the pantry, as soon as she walked home. And I just assumed that it was because, like other elementary kids, they eat lunch way too early, and so by the time they get home, because their metabolism just go, they're starving. Come to find out, we were talking to her teacher, and Taylor every day was sharing her lunch with another little girl who wasn't bringing a lunch. And it just broke my heart. I was so proud of her. Now I'm hoping that maybe she learned that generosity from Janet and I as givers ourselves, maybe not. But I actually believe, parents, it's our job, it's our responsibility as parents to teach our kids about generosity and how to give back to others. Now, Janet and I, we actually grew up around generosity, and I'm not talking about money. She and I both grew up with very similar faith backgrounds regarding to attending services on Sunday and praying around the dinner table, watching our parents read their Bibles together and pray together, but also in the area of giving back. Neither of our families comes from money, but our parents both taught us generosity in other forms. Our parents taught us how to say no to selfishness and say yes to lots of love, giving lots of grace, giving lots of forgiveness, giving lots of laughter, giving lots of humility, and giving lots of prayer. And you get to do that too. You may be here this morning and say, yeah, Jeremy, that wasn't my upbringing. I did not grow up around that. Those are not scenes from my past. Then guess what? It starts with you. You get to start that. You get to begin and to write this new chapter for your family. You get to set this new trajectory for your family in the area of generosity with the blessings that God has given you. And when you do that, you get to sit back and you get to watch what God begins to do in you and through you. You get to say, man, I'm a part of this. This is my church. I'm making a difference. I'm proud of what my church is doing in the community. We're making an impact, and I'm a part of that. You see that new facility? I'm a part of that. Did you hear about the campus that we're launching in Patterson? I get to be a part of that. Did you hear about the missions trips and the community projects that we're doing for next year? Man, that's my church, and I'm a part of that. It's amazing to be able to use what God has given us. And that starts when we begin to recognize the blessings that we have. We begin to think, man, God has blessed me with so much. Why would I not want to give back? Why would I want to keep all this just for me? God's blessed me with my family and my job and my health, my home, my vehicles, my relationships. It doesn't make sense for me to hoard all this. How can I give it away? God, thank you for all of these things, especially if we're trying to model the life of Christ, because Jesus is the ultimate giver. And we see this over and over in Scripture about how Jesus walked around open-handed and open-hearted with everything that he had, saying no to self, ready to give at all times. He gave life to the dead, both spiritually and physically. He gave sight to the blind. He gave power to the weak. He gave food to the hungry. He gave water to the thirsty. He gave to his enemies. He gave his life. He gave his light. He gave his love. Jesus says this in the book of Mark, the second book of the New Testament. For even I, the Son of Man, came not to be served, but to serve others and to give my life as a ransom for many. So here's my challenge to you. We need to learn to be givers and not takers. It's not about me. It's about what I can do for others. We should all be thinking of creative ways to give back to others. So let me ask you just a few of these questions. Do you need to be more generous with your compliments and your praise to your wife or to your husband and to your kids? Do you need to be more generous with your time and attention to the ones you love most? Do you need to step up and be more generous with your time and your energy and your resources to your faith community right here at New Life? What does that look like? Do you need to join a volunteer team? Do you need to join a life group? Do you need to help out in any way you can? Do you need to be more generous with forgiveness to those who don't deserve forgiveness? Do you need to be more generous with grace, more mercy, and more patience to the ones that you know are not going to give those things back to you? Because here's what I've discovered. We are never more like God than when we give, because he was such a giver himself and is. For it's in giving that we receive. I believe it could be that one thing that Curly was talking about. The secret of life, being givers. Will you pray with me? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity that you have given me just to kind of unload my heart and what I think you filled it up with. Help us, God, to be givers. Lord, when we give, we become more like you because you are such a giver yourself. You gave us your only Son. Jesus, you gave your life. Holy Spirit, you give us power to witness. You're such a giver, and we want to be givers ourselves. Lord, I pray something that was said this morning, either in the message or maybe one of the songs, maybe just a greeting of all of these people, all the volunteers who have given their time to look more like you. I pray that it just has resonated and just has embedded itself in our spirits. Lord, mess with us all week long. Every opportunity that you give us to give, Lord, just bring that to our conscience so that we know this is the opportunity, this is the time, this is the chance that we get to give and look like Christ. We love you, we praise you, and give all this to you in Jesus' name. Amen.